Have you ever felt like the only person in the room who thinks and feels deeply, who sees everything, whose intensity just doesn't fit, and whose internal world was just unknowable to the people around you? Same. There's a loneliness to it, and there's also a lot of pressure to create this palatable, small talking, people pleaser, family friendly version of yourself for everybody else, while the real you is just kind of in there, stuck in like eternal purgatory in your mind, and your life kind of just turns into a life where the things that you really think and really feel and really want just go unspoken. And if you don't feel like you have any control over it, then all of those things can kind of end up dying within you. And in a way, it's like the real you doesn't even exist, right? If you've resonated with any of this so far, then you're like me, because this has been how I've felt for a lot of my life. And it hasn't been fun, but it has been something that has been deeply satisfying and fulfilling to be able to reclaim about my life over the years, to be able to sort of rewild the real me, pull her outside of the shell of the person who I put on for my friends and family who I didn't think would be open to it or understand who I was or accept who I was, and to sort of break open that shell and let the person underneath emerge and live unbound, unbound by all of those things that used to feel like rope that was tied too tight around my center, you know? I think people who have really intense internal worlds often feel like outcasts and black sheep and really disconnected from a lot of the day to day of their lives, because you can tend to end up in situations where you're surrounded by a lot of people who just don't think like that, or who you don't necessarily feel like you have anything in common with that you could connect over, when your mind is going a mile a minute thinking about 80 different things that are like on a scale that is like universe wide. Well, they're chatting about what happened on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills last night and how crazy it was. And you just feel like taking a fork and sticking it in your eyeball, because that's like the absolute last thing in the world that you would want to be talking about. You'd rather be talking about philosophy or the incredible book that you're speeding through, that you are dying to talk about with someone, but like literally no one you know would be interested in it. And it feels like there's just something so at odds between you and the rest of the world that it can feel really, really difficult to find your place in your life, in the world around you. Like, where do you fit? Where do you go? Where do you belong? And it can be really tough to develop your identity as you're growing up and trying to exist within this world, with this duality of being who you actually are underneath and having all of these extremely deep and intense insights about the world and the people around you, but feeling like there's absolutely nowhere that you can go to express that or to feel accepted for it. I mean, some people grow up in environments that are safe spaces where they are encouraged to be their whole selves and to explore those parts of themselves, and they have people in their life who will have those conversations with them and really foster that sense of curiosity and largeness around the things that they're interested in and thinking about and contemplating and exploring in life. But then some people grow up in environments where everything is kept very small. Our thoughts and expression is kept pretty small, and we're made to feel like it isn't safe to be bigger than that, to be bigger than the room that we're in. And in a lot of those cases, people who have this type of personality and the way that they're built to just process the world and the way that their mind works is made to feel like it doesn't fit, doesn't belong, like there's even something wrong with them for being that way. And so those are the type of people who will find themselves growing up and developing this alter ego, this persona, this version of them who is more palatable to everybody, right? They're smaller, they're simpler, they don't talk as much, maybe as the people around them, because they don't really want to engage in the same type of things. They're not interested in all of the minutia and the little day-to-day things that are around them. Their minds are in the universe, they have these cosmic brains that are questioning essential truths about existence, but the people around them are like, hey, we're gonna go and buy some shoes. It's like the only thing I can think about today is these shoes that I want to get. And you're like, cool, okay, I guess so. So maybe you never felt safe to be you in all of your like deeply intense cerebral glory. Maybe you felt like you had to dim your light and make yourself smaller and simpler in order to fit in. Maybe it wasn't modeled to you that those were desirable traits and ways to exist, that it wasn't safe perhaps, or that you wouldn't be loved or accepted or welcome by the people around you or your family. And that's a pretty hard message to imbibe as you're growing up. It can make you feel like there is something deeply wrong with you, like you're just so fundamentally different, and that must be a bad thing because you just don't fit in. So this was definitely me to a certain extent. I've always been very in my head, very hyperactive in my head. I am a late diagnosed ADHDer, so nowadays I know that a lot of my hyperactivity actually is happening up here. I maybe wasn't the most physically hyperactive child ever, but in women, often things like ADHD and neurodiversity are more happening in our heads and in our brain and capacity and all of that. So for me, I was just like all over the place in my brain, contemplating a whole bunch of different things. I was always thinking super deeply about things, hyper focusing on stuff. And and I also just was the type of kid growing up who had these humongous designs for myself for life and dreams and visions of the millions of things that I was going to do with my life. I never felt ever, at least I don't remember ever feeling like I was someone who was just going to grow up and go to college and get a job and get married and buy a house in my hometown and have kids and just live that life. Just a simple go to work, come home, raise my family, go to church on Sunday, have dinner with my parents once a week type of person. And if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you felt connected somehow to the topic and in the intro and everything. But I also am making this for people who probably feel similarly or have had similar experiences and are looking to connect and sort of help understand why this is about them, like, and what to do about it, really. I'm not making this to make it like to shame anybody or say that being someone who's not built like this is a bad thing. It's not. Everyone is built uniquely and differently. And I think it's wonderful that some people really enjoy having these type of super simple lives that are really grounded. And the rest of my family is all like that. And they're wonderful people and they have nice lives and I'm very happy for them. It's just not the life for me. And it's okay that we all have, different needs and that we are built to function differently. I think mentally people should be more aware, I think, of like what they need mentally in order to be stimulated and satisfied with what they're doing in their life on a daily basis, but also in the grand scheme of things, like what their overall plan for life is. And I think sometimes we just really expect each other to be the same. We expect everyone to be built like us and think like us and be sort of made to have the same capacity for things as us. And as a society, I would love for us to just like leave that, let that go, let people be different, have different life paths, be, sort of just built to function differently than other people. There's definitely kind of like this majority think and pressure to, fit in with society at large. That is one of the reasons why people who are like this feel Like it's actually impacted their lives negatively because it makes them feel like they don't fit in and that there's something wrong with them. And it others them in a way that is not necessary. If we would just open up our, perspective and allow other people to have, different lives and purposes and paths than us. So anyway, I was saying like, when I was younger, I always had these huge designs for myself. I've always told people I want to be a million things and I want to do a million things. And, having this sort of very, simple trajectory was just never that was never one of the things I ever dreamed about as a kid. That's not who I ever thought I would be. And my life is kind of a reflection of that. I'm a very non-traditional person who's never really done things the way that I'm supposed to. and I'm glad that I've at least known myself well enough to follow my own path in a lot of cases, even though there are certainly ways and times that I do abandon that part of myself and sort of put on the mask to be like, no, I'm just a normal girl. And yes, why don't you tell me about how many times you walked the dog this week, Mom? That would be great. Not to be mean to my mom, she's lovely. But sometimes like your mind is out here thinking about how you're going to change the world and go out and do all these really grand things. And all of these different parts of yourself that you're going to get to explore and expand upon and express through the adventures and journeys of your life, and how exciting and expansive and opening that is for you. And then some people's focus is on like walking their dog every day and what they're going to do and what they're going to eat for lunch, and just working and coming home and getting the paycheck and paying the bills and watching what show they want to watch on TV. And that's totally fine. But if it's not you, if I'm not describing the type of person you are, it's also super important that we have spaces like this online where we can talk about it and admit that we're not that other type of person. Maybe we are people who have nonlinear brains. Like me, I'm a multi-potentialite and I've got ADHD, and you can sort of start to decode and uncover a lot of this stuff about yourself the more you start doing some internal exploration. I used to be an archaeologist, so I can use words like excavation when it comes to, doing your self-work and self-development and, going underneath your layers in order to uncover more truths beneath it. I love using archaeology metaphors since that was a big part of my life for a long time. Yeah, so here I was, this kid with all of these super grand designs for my life. But, that wasn't necessarily super exciting for my family. Looking back, I've learned this phrase in the last couple of years called toxic normativity. And it's this sense within a family unit or social group that there are only certain small parameters around what is acceptable and normal behavior. And you kind of have to fit within those. And if you start to stray outside of them, it can have detrimental effects for you, right? So your family or, social unit is trying to maintain these very strict boundaries of what's normal, and will do so to the point of it being kind of toxic, where it can cause, mental distress if you're rejected or penalized for being outside of those rules. And I wouldn't say that my parents and family were like so strict that it was dangerous for me to stray outside of the normal boundaries, but it certainly wasn't something that they loved. I wasn't in physical danger. I wasn't going to be turned out into the street when I dyed my hair purple when I was 15, but were they really, really mad about it? And did I hear about it for months? And did I feel rejected by them because of that? Yes. And so there were certain elements, I think, of toxic normativity that were really limiting me as I was growing up as a child, feeling very different from them. I was interested in very different things. I wanted to talk about and explore different things. I was so curious about a lot of things that I just don't think that they were equipped to deal with and sort of cultivate and support in me. So, there were some areas where it was really lovely. I had a safe home and loving parents, but I also felt unmatched in a lot of ways that ended up, making me feel pretty lonely when I was in my home and sort of detached and unable to connect on a really deep level with them. It's not something that you necessarily have like, the moment you move out of home, like snap your fingers and like put on your goth makeup and all of a sudden you're you. A lot of us kind of go through these stages of exploring how much of it we can let out and then bringing it back in and then pushing it out and pushing it in again. As you're a teen, a lot of people explore this through fashion and your look and your hair and how you express yourself in those ways. But, the great thing about the fact that our trajectory in life is long is the fact that at some point you're going to be an adult, right? So now we're adults who are hopefully autonomous and able to take more control over our lives, the people who are in our lives, the spaces where we show up, and the parts of ourselves that we allow and make peace with and integrate into our identity and who we are at home and private, but also in public. If you're someone who is used to kind of having to put on this mask to perform normativity around people, to people please in order to make sure that your otherness and difference isn't called out and, put in front of people as a bad thing. Like, oh, look at them, it's that black sheep again. There she is writing her poetry. Hopefully you're in situations now where you have more control over where you are in your environment so that you can start to cultivate a life where you can explore and come to terms with the fact that if there are those things in you, if there's things about you that just never fit, that made you feel wrong, that weren't palatable to other people, you are able to create that safe space for yourself now as an adult where you are able to let those things out and explore them. And so this has been a really fun part of my unbecoming over the last 20 years, I've had periods where I have leaned so much more heavily into these bits of myself, little parts of myself that I would decide I was going to explore. It's not always been smooth. I struggled sometimes with continuing to feel kind of black sheep and other and different. And like I was continuously having to kind of live in my mind and keep my depth to myself at certain points in my marriage, which, obviously not ideal for the person that you marry to be someone that you don't feel like you can be 100% yourself around. But a lot of us do that when we're younger because we are still conditioned to living in that environment that we grew up in. And it doesn't necessarily feel safe for us to go outside of that and to, allow ourselves to just be 100% authentic all the time and only be around people who allow us to be 100% authentic all the time. We often search out people who will continue to allow us to be safe in the way that our masking allowed us to be safe as we were growing up. So for people who found partners when they were young who did that for them, I think it's probably not super uncommon for a lot of us to have, had relationships or marriages where that was kind of part of our patterning still and something that we struggled with. And probably part of the reason why maybe eventually that relationship ended. I know it was for me. I struggled with feeling like I buried who I was in that marriage. And my ex-husband is a wonderful person and I care for him deeply. We're still very good friends. But I absolutely felt like I had to bury parts of myself in order to, please him and support him. We were also a military couple, and as a military spouse, it's definitely not ideal and like welcome to be someone who's like super different and weird in the military community. So there was also aspects there of feeling like, yeah, they are not going to accept me if I am who I really am around them, I definitely went to some military teas with the other spouses where they were like, "What MLM are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm in grad school to be an archaeologist." And they would be like, "What?" They're like, "Yes, I'm working on my first publication." Uh, and yeah, I definitely got some very weird looks, and so I definitely got rejected by a good number of spouses that I met in the military community because they did not know what to do with me. And to be honest, like I'm weird, so I that kind of makes sense. But at the end of the day, part of my own becoming process was being able to be honest and advocate for myself and understand that I was in the wrong environments for me. I think about conformity a lot, and whenever I talk about it, I try not to be mean about it. It's not ever anyone's fault if they're living a life that I view to be conformist, as if like it's a bad thing. It's their life. Like you get to choose how you live your life. And if you're doing things that I think are meant are set up to kind of like slot you into the system in a certain way that keeps you small and easily controlled, and like a part of the cog and the wheel of our capitalist government, like that's your choice. And maybe you have no idea that that's happening. You're just living your life, right? But again, like sometimes people who have like minds that just see patterns really well. Like I have really good pattern recognition. I usually sort of view things from a really large, wide perspective. And so I can kind of see a lot of stuff like that from a different level than if you were like on the ground floor and it was your everyday daily life. And so like it's not like a judgment thing, but it's just that when I see those type of situations now, especially now that I'm more like sort of deconditioned and understand myself and what I'm meant to be and how I'm built and all of that stuff a lot better, I just know that I can now, recognize those type of situations and communities and social groups and settings where that is going to be more of the, accepted way to show up in those spaces. And I can say, actually, that's not the space for me. That's not the space for me. I'm just not, that's not for me. And I can walk away and go find the spaces that are for me. So, yeah, if you are someone who relates to any of this, the wonderful thing now is that the internet has created a bunch of new third spaces for us, right? We have all of these new types of communities. We have ways to connect people. You can watch this video right now and be like, holy crap, Jenny's just like me. And you can feel a little bit less alone and you can feel a little bit more safe, a little bit safer, accepting and admitting that there are parts of you that are just different in a certain way, not a better way or worse way, but different in a way that requires and has different needs than other people, right? So you can look at your family and environment and your friends and the spaces where you are and you're showing up and start to ask yourself, like, do you feel like you fit in there? Do you feel like you can be honest and open and authentically yourself? Do you feel like if you have these questions or topics of interest or curiosities that you want to bring up to these people, will they be receptive to it? Will they support this side of you who is really, inquisitive and thinks big and feels deeply and is intense about things? Like, is this going to be, are these safe spaces for you to be like that and to find that acceptance and maybe kindred spirits among those type of people? And I'm hoping that you do have places that are like that. Nowadays, that I'm so much more comfortable with myself and know much more about myself through this whole process, have found a lot of spaces that are like that. But if you don't have any right now, let's find some. I think that you can start the process of figuring out what specifically it is about you that has always felt different and like it didn't fit in, and go searching for other people who are doing the things that you want to be doing related to that. If it's a topic or a special interest that you have, there are spaces where people are doing that. If it's just the way that you see the world, if it's something like being someone who's neurodivergent and you need communities where you can relate to other neurodivergent people, if you're a nonlinear thinker or a multi-passionate or a creative or someone who does non-traditional work, there are spaces where people are talking about it and excited about it and welcoming to other people who are like that. I just feel like we live in a really great time right now for making those connections and for being able to sort of step away sometimes, respectfully and with love, from the people and the spaces in your life where you have had to shrink yourself and stay small and bury those parts of yourself and keep it all inside your own little mental gym where you're the only person who works out. Uh, and you can be like, you know what, actually, like, I can't hang out this week. I'm doing something else. I'm going to this art show, or I'm gonna go to a yoga class. But there are definitely places where you can figure out how to connect with these type of people. And I highly encourage you to start doing that. Maybe work, a little bit on journaling about the things about yourself that feel different and have always made you feel a little bit more disconnected, or parts of yourself that you've had to hide or tamper down or change, in order to be more pleasing to others. And see what that says about you and the type of person and identity that you could see for yourself if you allowed yourself to integrate those bits and be proud of them and accept them and say it out loud, One place that I've been recently that I think has been really great is Substack. If you're not on Substack, maybe check it out. The great thing about Substack for me is, so there are a lot of thinkers on Substack and writers. That's the main purpose, thinking and writing. And so being in there has been really nice because there's a lot of people who are like intellectuals, people who are into self-development, self-reflection, thinking, philosophy, those type of things. But, there's certain spaces where, like YouTube, whereas people will be making content and it's more like for an audience to try and help them, because YouTube is one of these platforms that is educational at its core, which is one of the things that I really love about it. And so you can connect with people, but you also learn from the people that you connect with and watch on YouTube. And you can certainly learn from each other on Substack too, but I find it more of a community around people who are similar thinkers. So it's not so much there that the thinkers and, self-reflection and self-discovery folks and the personal development people are all providing lessons for people who are not as far on the journey to learn from. It's more like they're talking to their peers and talking about the experiences of being people who are pretty much all larger thinking people who think deeply and feel deeply and are intense about things and want really big things for their lives and have grand designs and have always felt like their purpose was really big and hasn't fit in with a lot of the people around them. And it's been really nice to be in this space where I can just talk to people and be like, yes, I feel exactly the same way. Like, oh, you're doing this. I've always wanted to do that. Or I've done something similar, and like make that connection where we feel like, oh, yes, we are not so different. There are so many of us who are just built like this, built different, built with nonlinear brains, who are curious and ready to explore all of these different topics and questions about life together. And if you have lived your entire life without feeling like you've ever found people that you could do that with, now is the best time ever to actually make the moves to go out and find those people. And then you can finally, hopefully, find a space where you can, and you do have people like that. And so, yeah, I guess the final message here is that there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect. You're great. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. You may have been conditioned to believe that there was, and you may have been conditioned to believe that being different was a bad thing, but it's not. It's not. It's a good thing. Difference is good. And so let's celebrate it. Celebrate your difference. Let your freak flag fly. I actually have a recent post on Substack that is about being different and a lot of the ways that I had support as I was sort of coming out of my youth in embracing my difference and understanding why it was one of my greatest strengths and not something that was just wrong about me. So I'll link that below if anyone wants to give it a read. But yeah, don't feel bad or weird or wrong because you may have been built a little bit differently, that you have dreams and desires that don't align with some of the other people in your life. It's not a bad thing. It's who you are and it's how you were made. And I think following those things and allowing them to be the best thing about you instead of the thing that you hide is what's going to help you become the most authentic, happy, fulfilled version of yourself. And I'm really happy for you that you're on that journey. So, anyway, that's what I felt like talking about today. So, I hope I did it pretty well. I just kind of went for it. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for this chat today. My name is Jenny, and I will see you again really soon. Man, it's weird finishing this right now. I don't know why this is so awkward. All right. Well, bye.